Hey, Dylan. Um, so happy it's Thursday, right? That's what they say, right? So happy it's Thursday. Well, I hope you're happy about something anyway. If you're not, hope you find your happiness soon. Um, and yes, we all have reasons to be maybe less than perfectly happy in the world. That's true, but you try to focus on the positive and do the good things. Well, at least you're focusing on them and doing the good things as much as you can. Um, yeah, I'm not a. Well, anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I what I wanted to talk to you about, maybe in some weird way, it's related to this, but is the situation in Mara Gaza. Right? People have been calling it Gaza Lago. No, it's not Gaza Lago. It's Mar a Gaza. Mar meaning sea. Gaza. Sea by Gaza. The sea at Gaza. Right? So, um, what is going on there? Well, you might have noticed there's a little war happening. And that little war has been leveling the place one building at a time. And despite the tens of thousands of bombs that have been dropped on the place, um, the population in that territory has actually gone up, which is great. Wonderful. More babies they have. Yay. Hopefully they'll raise them to be peaceful. But what has the evidence of that been since ever? Yeah, no. They're not going to raise them to be peaceful. As long as the current situation remains as it is, which is Hamas is in power in Gaza. Well, then what needs to change? Hamas needs to be removed from power. Okay, what's one way to do that? Okay, eliminate everybody, which is not a nice thing to do, and we should avoid doing that as much as possible. Okay, what's another way to do that? Force everybody out, which people will say is ethnic cleansing. But if you look at history, you will see that wars have consequences, and losers very often have to vacate their territory. Germany in World War II lost. And after they lost, all the Germans who lived on the region of France or on the border with France in the whole Alsace-Lorraine area, right, they had to move. A lot of them, millions of them, in fact, right? More than the number of Palestinians in Gaza had to move. And they redeveloped the area. And there has been peace now between France and Germany for 80 years. And a strong peace. And those two nations are, in fact, the two leading economies in all of Europe, in the European Union. And that is just one of many wonderful historical examples that you can look at. It's a recent one, too. I mean, people alive today saw it. There are people well into their 80s or 90s, and some older, who remember that, like, very well. So, Gaza being evacuated by force, not necessarily ethnic cleansing, but being evacuated by not force. Now, let's put it this way. Ethnic cleansing, okay, if this was the only place that Gazans, Arabs who now call themselves Palestinians lived, you could make that case. But okay, let's say we make that case too. It's ethnic cleansing if you force them to leave. Okay, but if you're forcing them to leave in order to build them something better, and that you will eventually, whether Trump says he will or won't, remember, this will take many years. This isn't something that Trump is going to see finished as president, even if they start it under his term in office. This will take 2, 3, 4, presidential terms of office, right? It'll be at least 5-10 years, maybe 20, before the project is completed. By then, you'll have Palestinians who've established themselves and live a decade or two in other countries, and some of them will be very comfortable and happy there, probably most. Some of them will want to return, and hey, if they can prove that they don't support terrorism and that they're peaceful people and that they contributed positively to the societies that they lived in, whether it be in Gaza or wherever they are, wherever they moved to, no problem. But if it's a voluntary migration, right? If the people moving want to move, well, then it's definitely not ethnic cleansing. It's people wanting to move, being given the opportunity to do so. And you could say, well, but they wouldn't want to move if Israel didn't destroy their place. Well, Israel wouldn't have destroyed their place if they didn't fuck around and find out. But they did, because the people of Gaza 18 years ago, and you could say, well, it was too long, but it still happened. 18 years ago, chose Hamas, and they have not demanded elections since then. Oh, but there haven't been elections since then, so how could they choose? They have not demanded it. They have not put the pressure on the Hamas. They have not found the courage. They have not had the balls to stand up to their Hamas leaders, dictators, and say to them, hey, we want the right to vote. And we want you to give us a vote every X number of years. And we want a constitution, and we want you to build a country, and we want you to focus on infrastructure. They didn't do any of those things. They behaved like a bunch of ridiculously overgrown children, and they were being cuddled by the international community. Yes, cuddled, not cajoled, cuddled. They were being suckled at the teat of international aid money. Instead of being told to lift themselves up by their bootstraps as a nation, if they wanted to be one, right? No, they just went on the old foreign aid train, demanding more and more of that crap. Well, FAFO bitches, right? That's what happens. You start a war, you lose it, there's consequences. One of those consequences is you don't dictate the terms when you lose. The terms are dictated to you because you started the war. You were the aggressor. You were the belligerent aggressor or the aggressive belligerent. And Israel was the defensive belligerent, and Israel kicked your ass. And you must accept loss and defeat because you are the losers. Oh, you don't like hearing that. Oh, we'll never say we lost. Well, you did fucking lose. You lost big time. You lost every war you started with Israel, and you've only lost them worse and worse until you got to the point now where even the President of the United States in the White House uttered the words, we're going to take control of Gaza. It'll be ours. And there'll be a voluntary migration. Now, here's the funny thing. I don't mean to rub salt onto your wounds, but you need to deflate your ego and your boastfulness a little bit. That's why I tell it to you like it is. Because you have to. Arab culture has prevented you, has stunted your growth. The Arab culture of boastfulness. Not all Arabs are like this, by the way. Definitely the ones in Israel are not. Israeli Arabs are super advanced, just like Israeli people in general. Right? They're very advanced people. Now, they're also very primitive people in some other ways that we can joke and laugh about. Absolutely. But when it comes to ideas about how to govern, they're advanced. Which one? what is happening with the actual people of Gaza? How come all of the evidence that we see that people object to this plan all comes from people from outside Gaza? And all the evidence that we see of actual so-called Palestinians supporting it come from actual people in Gaza. Why does it not occur to anyone to ask them their opinion? Don't you think that's quite telling? Because I sure do. I think it's very telling that Palestinians are not being asked, hey, what do you think about this plan? They're not being given the opportunity. Right? Why is that? Why are they not being asked? You know why? Because people don't want to ask them. Pollsters don't want to ask them. Pollsters are afraid to show that most people in Gaza would love to leave. I see you and I say hola to you too. Right? Why is it that the people in Gaza are not being asked, what would you like to do? Do you approve of this plan? You know, I've seen questions being asked of Arabs in Judea and Samaria. What do you think of Trump's plan? And they all say reflexively, oh, it's a stupid plan. Just like all of their useful idiots in the West who don't actually want a state of Palestine. They don't actually want Palestine to be free and democratic and living in peace side by side, peace and prosperity next to Israel. They don't want that. They want an oppressive caliphate. That's what they want. They want an Islamic caliphate. Well, too bad. You don't get to have that. Why? Well, because you lost the frickin' war. So you don't get to dictate the terms of victory for the Israelis. Or for anyone else for that matter. Right? The terms of surrender are yours to accept. Right? And we all know what happens if you don't accept the terms of surrender. You don't want to do that. Right? It's not up to you, right? And I'm pretty sure at this point the people in Gaza will be very happy to accept the terms of surrender if given the chance. But they're not being given the chance because, again, they are ruled by Hamas. And nobody's asking the people of Gaza what they think. Now, here's the thing. A lot of them still support Hamas. That's also true. But just because they support Hamas does not mean they support their own suicide. They might support Hamas being a bunch of idiots running around doing idiotic things, and they might think, yeah, great, that's wonderful. Keep doing that, but keep me out of it. Because if it wasn't the case, then why aren't there 2 million Gazan suicide bombers? Right? Why not? What, they don't have the gunpowder? No, they have the gunpowder. They've been storing it away and hiding away for decades. They definitely have the gunpowder. Why don't they all just suicide themselves at once? Why not? If they really believe in their national obsession with killing people so much and killing themselves first and foremost. Why don't they just all do it at once? All these mothers who say, I have children so that they can be martyrs. Why is she such a coward? Why did she martyr herself first? Why did she even get to the point where she could have children? Shame on her, right? If you believe in that disgustingness. Right? Eternal shame on her that she lived long enough to even have children. From the point of view of if you believe that kind of garbage. She shouldn't have had children. She should have been dead long ago. But she was a coward. Okay. So she's a coward. No problem. No disrespect. There are cowards in the world too, and that's fine. But if you're going to be a coward, at least own up to it. At least admit it and stop lying and saying that you're so great and so courageous. And stop saying that you believe in all this jihad garbage. Because you don't. Because you're still alive. If you believe in this suicide warfare, well, then why are you still alive? Because you don't believe in it. You're lying. That's all you can do is lie. We know. We know that's all you can do. We know you're not better than that. If you were better than that, people of Gaza, you wouldn't have started this war. So is Mara Gaza good for the Arabs of Gaza? I think yes, it is very good. It gives you Arabs of Gaza an opportunity to live elsewhere in peace and prosperity. It gives you Arabs of Gaza the ability to develop a life and raise your children in an area that's not swallowed up by this conflict that you started many, many, many years ago when you refused to accept Jews to have autonomy and self-determination in their own ancestral homeland, which is crazy because that's the thing you say you want. You say you want sovereignty in your homeland, but it's not your ancestral homeland, but let's pretend that it is. Why would you deny Israel the right to have the very thing you claim to want? Right? On separate land, right? Israel's land is Israel's, your land is your land. Why can't you accept that? No, we want it all. Well, you don't get to have it all. You get to share. Well, we were here first. No, you weren't here first. The Jews are from Judea. Judea was here long before Islam ever existed. The Jewish people descended from Abraham. He was here long before Islam ever existed. Well, we are descendants of Ishmael. Yeah, and Ishmael was not a Muslim. Well, Muslim means accept God. That's nice. It means that in Arabic. Ishmael was an Amalekite eventually, right? He created the Amalekites, right? So no, he didn't create Islam. But you can say, oh, the descendants of it. Yeah, sure, descendants of Ishmael. Fine. Abraham spurned his son, Ishmael. So if you tell me you're the sons of Ishmael, you're telling me, okay, yeah, we're cousins on the big family tree. But you're not the good cousins. You're the ones, I mean, you as an individual maybe. But your group of people came from the bad cousin who was turned away from his father, who his father sent away because he was not happy with him. He was a bad son. Abraham, Isaac, Joseph. These are the forefathers of the Jews, right? The Jewish people were here long before Islam ever was. Why do I keep mentioning that? Because if you're going to go to the stupid argument, and it is a stupid argument of who was here first, of the people alive on the planet today, there is nobody that has a longer, deeper, and existing connection with the land of Israel than the Jewish people. That is not even an arguable point. There's nothing to debate. There is not just archaeological evidence. There's every kind of evidence imaginable. Cultural evidence, historical evidence, scientific evidence, right? We have geometric proof evidence that Jews were here before Arabs, okay? We have just DNA evidence, right? That the Arabs of Saudi Arabia, what is now Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, where the word Arab comes from, Arabian Peninsula, before they conquered the rest of that peninsula and around themselves in the rest of the Middle East, including the Levant, including Judea and Samaria, including Lebanon, including Turkey, right, the Byzantine Empire, including North Africa, including all the way out to Persia, right? Before they conquered and colonized all of that, they were from the Arabian Peninsula. That's where that all comes from. And those that showed up again in Gaza mostly showed up towards the end of the 19th century. Okay, I'm not talking about the few here or there who had families that stayed here once they conquered it originally, and they sort of lived there mostly as nomadic shepherds for a few centuries before the beginning of the return of Jewish people at the end of the 19th century. And then you had Arabs coming to work for the British and in the south, in Gaza and in parts of Judea and Samaria. And you also had Arabs coming in to work for the French in the areas of where the Golan Heights, right, and some other areas of southern Syria. Okay, because those areas, after the decline of the Ottoman Empire, those areas needed manpower to service the needs, right, of the British and French empires that had agreed under the Sykes-Picot Agreement to divide up the land between the land of the Middle East between different Arab groups and to reserve land for the Jews, right, on what was then called the Ottoman Governorate of Palestine, and then it became British Mandate Palestine, and they agreed to give British Mandate Palestine to the Jews, and then only after Arab protest did they agree to give 70% of that land, British Mandate Palestine. They agreed to give 70% of it to the Arabs, and they called it Transjordan. And that became Jordan eventually, but that was originally called Transjordan back in the early 20th century because the British had renamed it that. That was originally part of the land that was promised to the Jews. 70% was taken away from the Jews. And then an additional half of that was taken away when they decided to establish the state of Israel. So the Israelis ended up getting a half of the 30%. They got about 15% of the land they were originally promised, and we accepted. I said, fine, 15% is better than nothing. Nevertheless, the Arabs rejected it. And they rejected it, and they started a war, and they lost. And now, 80 years later, 76 years later, since the establishment of the state, well, now there's consequences. Because now you finally have a president in the White House, whether you like him or not. I mean, it's not the point, okay? It doesn't matter. I don't really care about the issues right now. I'm talking about this issue. When it comes to this issue, he is the first president to actually make a suggestion that actually changes the game. It doesn't matter if you like him or not. It's completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you think he's the most evil dictator of all time or whatever. It doesn't matter. He actually is changing the game. Why? Because, like I said, the moment he uttered those words, I said he changed the landscape. It doesn't matter if you think it's a joke or if you think it's an idiotic idea. Ask the people in Gaza. Go watch the videos that have been shown of the people in Gaza that actually like the idea. Like, think about it. If you support the notion of an Arab nation called Palestine, why would you deny them the right to choose to leave if they want to? Why? Because a president you happen to not like for various other issues suggested giving them the right to choose to leave? Think about it this way. If you're a Democrat and you believe in the right to choose for women, why would you deny the right to choose to Palestinians? I'm 100% serious. Why would you deny them the right to choose? Are they too childlike for you? Are they too immature for you? If they are, then you're a racist because you treat them like children. Stop treating them like children. They're not children. The ones who are adults are not children. Oh, but half of them are under the age of 18. Yeah, that's because their parents don't stop faffoing. You need to stop infantilizing Arabs. You need to stop treating them like children who can't take care of themselves. They know what they're doing. They are fully aware of their own actions. And by the way, if grown-ass men and women make stupid decisions for their culture as a group, that's their problem. Societies and civilizations come and go based on the actions or inactions of the people of that group. If the people calling themselves Palestinians can do nothing but make stupid decisions, eventually that people group will cease to exist. They don't even have to lose through war, although that is a common way. They will cease to exist because they won't breed correctly. They will eventually merge into other people groups and disappear. Palestinians will never die. Right, sure. Death to the Zionists, sure. Yeah, we've heard death to Jews for thousands of years. Guess what? Jews are still here. You know why? You know why? It's a very simple word. Education. It all comes down to education and values. Where do you think the military might comes from within Israel? Where do you think the money comes from within Israel? Where do you think the political power comes from within Israel? Where do you think all the things that Israel has that it didn't have 80 years ago? That simply didn't exist. There was no Israel 80 years ago, right? 1945. It was 3 years later, so 77 years ago, in 1948, that Israel was reestablished as the homeland for the Jewish people. Where did all this ability come from? Oh, they got foreign aid from America. No, they did not get foreign aid from America until after the 1967 war. Okay, America did not help arm Israel for the first 20 years or so of its existence at all. And it was the French who actually used to support the Israelis the most. France still has a decent relationship with Israel when it comes to military arms and supplies. But obviously, it was a significantly smaller level of supply. But what helped the actual Israelis to build the nation and survive and grow and thrive over the last 77 years? Was it occupying Palestinians? No. It was having gumption, never taking no for an answer, never quitting, never surrendering to stupidness, to stupidity, and using your brains to win the fight. That is ultimately why Israel has thrived for the past 77 years. And when people who now object to Palestinians having the ability to thrive in similar fashion by doing something completely different, which isn't really that unexpected. Like, again, I've said it again. Trump is not the first person to suggest that some other power take over Gaza and rebuild it into a seaside resort. Israel offered this to the Saudis, who seriously considered the plan, only rejecting it eventually. Multiple times. The same thing was offered by Israel to the Egyptians, because Egypt used to own Gaza. They used to be in control of Gaza, right? That's where most of the people in Gaza are from. They were Egyptian 80 years ago. Not even 80 years ago. In 1967, before the Six-Day War, the people in Gaza were Egyptians. And by the way, right, really from 1968, right? Because if you're going to round up the math, right? So the war of 67 was in June. So technically, yeah. Anyway, so let's just say half the year, 1967. We'll count it from 1967. That's when Gaza was under Israeli, quote unquote, occupation. If you want to even call it that. It wasn't occupied. It was being settled by the victors of the war. And the losers of the war that were in Gaza were allowed to stay. because Israel didn't force them to leave. Israel said, let's live side by side in Gaza next to the Palestinians on land that we won in war. Oh, but the Gazans couldn't accept that they lost the land, even though they lost the land. So all in all, and from 2005 until today, 20 years now, it's been run by Palestinians, right? People that call themselves Palestinians of Gaza. So from 1948 until 1967, that's 19 years, 20 years. It's 20 years, right? If you count on the date. For the first 20 years of Israel's existence, Gaza was not run by Israel. It was run by Arabs. And for the last 20 years, it's been run by Arabs. So that's 40 years. Israel controlled Gaza for, do the math, 2005, 1968. You get 37 years. Okay. And that, again, that's being gratuitous. If you want to get technical, 1967 they left. But 1968 to 2005, 37 years. Even if you go the full 38, you count from June, count from the day of, 38 years is less than 40 years. Meaning the Arabs have controlled Gaza since Israel's existed for more than half the time. Israel has controlled Gaza since its rebirth as a country for less than half the time since Israel has been a country again. So this whole occupied Gaza story doesn't work, bro. Doesn't work. It just doesn't. Gaza is not occupied. If anything, Gaza is occupied by Hamas, and it should stop being occupied by Hamas. Hamas is a, if Egypt is a foreign entity to the people of Gaza, which is funny because they're from Egypt, but if they pretend that it's a foreign entity, well, then they should definitely hate Hamas, because Hamas is an invention of the Muslim Brotherhood. But Israel created it. No, Israel did not create the Hamas. Israel helped the Hamas in its very early days to be a counterpoint to the Palestinian Authority. But Israel did not create the Hamas. And if you ask any of the creators of the Hamas if Israel created it for them, they would laugh at you and probably kill you. Hamas was invented by its co-founders, and it was their co-founders who were effectively told to do so by the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt. Pretending otherwise does not change the facts. So once again, is a voluntary displacement of Muslims who live in Gaza and call themselves Palestinian, is it a good thing for those Arabs of Gaza? I would argue that it is. Because, as in, they want to do it. How do you know? Well, go ask them. So far, all the evidence we've seen when you actually ask the Arabs of Gaza, would you like to leave, is yes. When you actually look at the record of the fact that apparently 100,000 Palestinians have left Gaza over the past number of years because they could afford to bribe the Egyptians at the gate, because it's the Egyptian gate that they go through most of the time when they want to flee. And it's therefore the Egyptians that they have to bribe to allow them to go out of Gaza. Why is it that Egypt, which are literally the brothers and sisters of the people in Gaza, like they're the same people, why can they not accept having more of their own people in their own country? Is it because that since living in Gaza for 80 years or some period thereof, suddenly these people are what? Now too extremist to live among you in Egypt, where they're from? Maybe you should have thought of that when you brainwashed these people and when you allowed them to become extremists in the first place. Maybe you shouldn't have made them into such ideological extremists. Maybe there's a cost for brainwashing people into ideological extreming. Maybe you shouldn't FAFO. So that's the news for you. Again, I don't care if you love Trump or hate Trump. This has nothing to do with that. All he's done is interject with a frankly great idea in the sense that it changes the discussion. It already has. I don't care if you like the idea or not. When I say great, I mean it is a significant idea. Okay? Significant. Let's call it that instead. A big idea. And you can say it's not a big idea, it's an idiotic idea. It's a fascist dictator idea. Whatever. This is the Middle East. In the Middle East, people speak with force. You may not like that in your cushy American life, but that's how it is here. And that is the reality. And that's why somebody like Trump, whether you like him or not, gets a lot of respect in the Middle East. Because he talks with a lot of bluster and force. Whether he has the cojones to back it up or not is another entire story. And the fact is, he is president of the United States. So technically speaking, right now as president, he has the military cojones all he wants to do whatever he wants. So I would not be sitting there and just reflexively hating on this plan just because Trump said it, because that is idiotic. That is being against finding a proper resolution to this long-standing conflict. And what he has proposed could actually spur the end of this long and idiotic conflict. It could finally force at least the Arabs of Gaza to acknowledge, yes, we fucked around and we found out and we lost and it sucks. And that's fine. We accept it. And we accept that Israel are the victors. And we accept the terms of surrender include leaving this hellhole, having a better life somewhere else, raising our children in peace and prosperity somewhere else, and forgetting about this dump site. And let it be a casino in the future. God bless whoever rebuilds it and manages to do that. And maybe one day my children or their children's children will want to come back to that place, but not until they, disavow the idiotic ideologies that I taught them to believe in violence and terrorism. It's that simple. Make it an American territory, like Puerto Rico. Why not? It's honestly the best thing that could ever happen to Gaza. That's my opinion. Changed my mind. Good luck. See you in the next one. Shalom.